All right. Hello, everyone. Marvin B here, getting ready to start another episode of Podnuts Pro. I know that some of you have been waiting. We started a little bit late, and that's just the price you pay when you're not a big fish and the person you bring on has much bigger people that they can deal with and all of that good stuff. So looks like we are set. Mr. Bradley Gross is in the green room. So we are going to go ahead and start the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Podnuts Pro. I am your host, Marvin B., coming at you live from Fort Lauderdale. And today I am joined by my good friend, Mr. Bradley Gross. Brad, how are you?
Good. Good to see you, Marvin.
Good to see you.
All right.
So I need to let everybody that was watching the podcast live that you saw a picture of a FedEx truck. And the reason that I did that is because FedEx Watch is over. After 32 days, my boxes finally showed up. So I want to say thank you to FedEx. And some of you probably saw my personal Facebook page where I posted a Stop the Presses picture, actually a little mini video, because FedEx showed up at my office 2 days in a row. Almost basically a miracle for that. So I wanted to say thank you for FedEx for finally bringing my packages. I also need to thank two people over at D&H, Rhonda and September. They were people that kind of got in for me. D&H, I don't know if people know this, but they have something called a traffic department. So anytime they have issues with shipping or stuff, they actually have a dedicated team to work with all of their shipping and freight carriers. So they did that for me on my behalf. The FedEx truck showed up with only my packages in them. So I don't know what they did, but I thank them for that. Thank you, D&H. They also extended my terms because I have net 30 terms with them. And since I did not get the package in 32 days, they said, you know what, we'll give you an extra 30 days. So thank you all for that. So all right, let's go ahead and go on the show. I don't really have too many announcements. Do we need a weather report, Bradley? It's been a nice day down here.
It has been nice. Yeah, it's it's Florida, so it's Florida hot, Florida humid, right?
Yes.
But I guess we can't complain because in another month or so, everyone will wish they're down here, right?
That is true.
Yeah,
that is true. And our only saving grace is that Rona might keep them away.
That's true. That is true. You're right. But
So
no, all is well down here so far. So far, so good.
All right. So speaking of Rona, I know that this has kind of put a damper on your travel plans. You are usually out touring, either with the ASCII Success Summit or some of the other conferences. You've been kind of stuck here with us. More terrestrial. So how's it been going for you?
I wouldn't call it stuck with you. I enjoy this. It's fine. We're all sort of getting used to the video platform and the hooking up the cameras and doing it from bedrooms and living rooms and pseudo home offices and so forth. But I think that it's really helped companies focus on content. Right? Instead of having to sort of flood an event with all kinds of information and so forth, now companies can say, well, we can focus on content, we can focus on a specific speaker and so on. So I think there's a silver lining in it.
Yep. Get rid of some of the fluff and just get down to the nitty and gritty.
That's it. That's what it's about.
Yep. So speaking of content, I'm going to go ahead and transition right now. One of the things that I really wanted to talk about with you is your technology broadcast, because the last few episodes have been, in my words, fantastic.
Great. Thank you. Thank you.
That is something, folks, that if you have not yet taken part in listening to the Technology Bradcast, you should do that. And I believe I have a little ticker here with the website there, the Technology Bradcast, and I will have the link in both the show notes and on the YouTube page.
Yes, thank you. And you also could go to just the name, technologybradcast.com. I mean, you could go Bradley Gross, it's at Podbean, that's who hosts it, but technologybradcast.com will get you there as well.
Well, I will say this. If you just do a Google search, Google tries to correct you and call it the Technology Broadcast. So you have to be careful.
Yeah, I that's the risk I took when I, tried to be clever with Bradcast, but it is what it is. But now we're on Spotify, we're on Apple, and we're on Google Play Music and so forth. So it's getting out there.
All right, kind of like Podnuts Pro, getting out there. Not that it's being downloaded, but it's getting out there. So yours, I know gets downloaded because I've had many of listeners tell me that they went and binged listened. So that was great.
Great. Yeah, I think we have about 25 episodes, and the last one or two were about clients that decline, right? What do you do when a client declines? What you're offering them, and how do you, memorialize that? How do you protect yourself? And another one was talking about your value and what you're worth, and pricing, and don't let clients modify your pricing because they don't perceive value in what you're offering. So, yeah, there's some business, there's some law there. It's a lot of fun.
So the value one was kind of interesting because not only did you tell a personal story in that one, it sounded like you were getting a little worked up there. And so was it the story itself, or was some other outside factors that were getting you,
Well,
heated?
no, there were no real outside factors other than to say that, look, MSPs, technology service providers, are just that. They're service providers. Law is also, it's a service. Right? We are all providing services. And the thing that many service providers face is the issue of commoditization. And, can somebody look at your solution and say, well, it sounds great, it'll help me, but I could find that $10 cheaper per workstation, $5 cheaper, whatever it is, somewhere else, right? Can I get your advice or this agreement for $100 cheaper somewhere else? And if you allow yourself to be sucked into that kind of vortex, it's a race to the bottom, essentially. So, my advice is, and I say this not only to technology solution providers, I say this to colleagues, fellow attorneys. Understand your value. Understand what you bring to the table. Right? You can find somebody who has been engaged in a particular service for a number of years, and then they, read a few articles, and then they purport to be experts. Or you can find someone like yourself that's been doing this for 20, 30 years, whatever it is. And, there are simply no scenarios that you haven't experienced. Maybe you haven't read the same article that the new guy on the block has read, but you've actually lived it, and there's value in that. And it's how do you convey that value? How do you express that to your customers? If you are doing it, great. If you're not, well, then customers may view you as a commodity.
Right. That is an argument that we as MSPs and IT providers always have.
Yeah.
Somebody's doing it cheaper. And down here in South Florida, that's across the board with any type of contractor or anything. It is that race to the bottom. So I always try to talk about it, as you said, from the value is that, yeah, you can find it cheaper, but are you going to get apples to apples, oranges to oranges?
Right.
When you look at the not just the components, but the experience and the level of interaction, because that's always the big thing that I've at least experienced is that customers, they like it when they can see you. They like it when you can talk with them and not make them feel stupid, which we can do easily. Not that it's intentional that techs do it. But we can start speaking tech language and just lose them right away.
That's right. That's right. You have to understand it from the customer's perspective. You have to understand that they don't quite understand what you do. And as a result, they'll try to categorize it or box it into a framework. And once you do that, once you're boxed into a framework, well, now, at least from a customer's perspective, they can compare that box to any other box. So you want to avoid that from happening. And I think that, you've touched on something that's exactly on point, which is, it's not a question of the solution you're selling. Look, a lot of you are reselling the same solution, whatever it might be, from the same vendor. So how do you stand out? Well, I would suggest that you take there's an analogy, at least, that can be drawn to merger and acquisition. Say, merger and acquisition, what does that have to do with this? It has a lot to do with it. When you are acquiring a company, or when you are being acquired, one of the questions is, what's your company worth, right? What's it worth? All right. One of the ways you determine the value of a company is to determine the stickiness between you and your customers, the stickiness. How much are you reaching out and touching your customer and interacting with your customer on a daily, weekly, monthly basis? How much does your customer rely on you for a service, or knowing that you're there? Because anyone can sell any sort of, malware solution, but, training, questions about that. Are you there for the customer? Are you constantly reaching out saying, hey, how are things going? Is it working for you? What have you noticed in our solution that we're providing? That kind of what we call stickiness increases the value of a company when you're evaluating it for merger and acquisition. It's the same exact thing that should be applied when you're trying to figure out and know your value, right? Don't be commoditized. Reach out, get to know your customer, maintain that relationship, know your value, convey that, and your customers will understand it and believe it as well.
All right. That's what we try to do. And just a side note, one of the reasons I asked you that question earlier, because I know that, for instance, I know that a lot of listeners here come to you in tire kick, and they basically like, okay, well, we want to do an agreement, we want to do this, but we don't want to pay that much for it. And from somebody that works with a lot of attorneys, 70% of my clients are attorneys. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
No.
Are you in therapy for that, or are you okay? Are you all right?
Me and the wife have chats all the time.
Okay, good. As long as you're, letting it out. Don't hold that in. Go on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so one of my attorneys I have used for stuff in the past, but they're not a technology attorney. They're not somebody that understands my business. They just assume business is business and everything applies the same way. So I know that there are times when I try to explain, well, why should somebody use Bradley Gross over this? And a lot of it is what you said in that one podcast, where you've been doing this for years. You have worked with thousands of MSPs, and you know the situations that we're involved with. So, the question I had kind of posed as part of this podcast is, do IT providers need a new type of attorney?
Well, I guess at the risk of sounding like promoting self-interest, I think so. The idea is that you need to go to a specialist, increasingly, right? If you're having an ankle problem, you wouldn't go to a heart surgeon. Might be the best heart surgeon in the world, brilliant heart surgeon, can't help you with an ankle problem, right? So the idea is that if you have a specific problem, you need to have a specific solution. The way, I've been operating, like you said, I've been doing this a long time, about 20 years or so. And what happens is, over those years, I have seen a lot of what I call situational realities, right? It's the reality. It's where you're actually dealing with a customer and something happens, either by a mistake or a miscommunication or a miscalculation, or sometimes things happen because things happen. Right? Life happens. And those situational realities only come with experience. Let's say you're providing a BDR solution, and the client says, well, we're a medical office, so this is HIPAA compliant, right? Yes, it's HIPAA compliant. Well, very often, unfortunately, the client walks away thinking, now I'm HIPAA compliant. No, you're not HIPAA compliant. We're giving you, right, the technology solution provider would say, we've given you a solution that is compliant with a regulation, but we haven't made you regulatory compliant. That's a reality. That's a situation that your listeners probably face all the time, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't think about that if you did general corporate law, or if you sort of understood how to write a contract. You wouldn't think about the fact that BYOD is an issue and that people are plugging devices in and out of the environment all the time. You wouldn't think about home-based networks and how people are distributed their workforces. You wouldn't think about transition services, right? What happens at the end? Things will end, and unfortunately, they don't always end well. So what will you have, right? As a solution provider, what information might you have that at the end, and assuming things aren't going well at the end, that your client might want back? Passwords, right? Admin information. Do you have to give it to them? Should you give it to them? What if they haven't paid you? These are the realities that an MSP attorney will deal with all the time. And if they're not in your documents, well, then you've paid for a document that now you have to bring in an attorney to interpret. There shouldn't have to be an interpretation process. That's how I view it.
And since you mentioned offboarding, that's one of the things that I think and I say we because I did it for a long time, and I'm in the process of redoing my whole offboarding kit.
Right.
Because we really focus on onboarding. We have, loads and loads of documentation on how to onboard somebody. But what happens when the party's over?
That's right.
And I've had.
And if you think about it, Marvin, when the party is over, it's usually not because the client or, your customer says, Marvin, great guy, loved him. He charged me the best prices ever, but I'm leaving him, right? It's either because they're closing up shop, which could happen, in which case they're in a very specific mental and financial situation, right? Or they believe that something has gone wrong and they've been wronged. And there's going to be some antagonism there. And the question is, what do you do? Right? How do you handle that? Right. I mean, that's an issue.
It is. So offboarding is a big thing that, and you have some wording in my contract because I remember seeing it, but I, now have to set up the processes. In my career, most of them have gone well.
Good.
I had one customer I fired, and I think I've had two just flat out like disappear, stop paying, or something happened like that, and were jerking me around. So, but I did not have a process in place for that. So having all of these things together for those situations specifically, because back then I could have said, I could have sent something saying, look, your contract says this, this is what we agreed to. You signed it. I signed it. Let's do this. Luckily, they've all worked out. I have no idea if they like me or not. And, life goes on.
It's an issue because, not only do you have to think about data, right? And how you're going to handle that type of thing, but rest assured the incoming provider is going to need your help to some extent. Well, that means you have to extend your staff and your personnel. Who pays them? Who pays them for that? You pay them for that. Who should be paying for it, right? That's an issue. So transition is something that, and termination is something that someone who practices in this field and does this type of thing thinks of as a matter of course. It's not something that you want to think of when it's going on, because at that point, there are timelines, there are milestones that need to be hit on both sides. And that's not the time to turn around and say, oh, I should call an attorney and figure this out.
Right.
So,
So your last podcast that I listened to it. I didn't have time to go back and dissect it on the declination letters.
Declination letter, sure.
That's kind of an interesting one because I've always come from the standpoint of I'll provide you with a proposal,
right,
or a scope of work, and you either sign it or you don't, and that's that. But in terms of just simply, if I give a recommendation, for instance, somebody sends me an email, hey, what do you think about this? And then I respond, well, you should do this, blah, blah, blah. In some sense, we probably should be doing something much more formal, correct?
I think so. I think these days it's important. There are a couple of things that happen when a client declines your service, right? One, They may be declining it because of cost. So they truly don't understand or at least appreciate the value versus the cost. That's the first thing that's happening. Second, they may have a mismanaged expectation. They may say, well, cost isn't a factor. I just don't think I need it, which means maybe the MSP has not conveyed the importance of what they're trying to say to the customer. And as a result, a lot of providers simply walk away. They say, okay, well, I'm telling you, you need A, B, and C. You're going to take B. All right, we just won't give you A and C. And they walk away. Of course, what ends up happening somewhere down the road is the customer actually has a situation that could have been prevented with A and C. Customer turns around and says, why haven't you prevented this? And you say, well, you may remember I told you A and C. I don't remember that. Or, yeah, I remember you mentioning that, but you didn't really emphasize the importance of it. Or, you told me about C. I don't remember you mentioning A. And now we're in it, right? Now we're in that reality where the customer will say, in fact, because you didn't do it, now I'm in a bind. You've let me down. You're not the professional I thought you were. I want out of this contract. And the whole house of cards begins to fall. So, and we have been seeing this with increasing frequency as distributed workforces have become more complicated and more ubiquitous. We've seen this with more regulations coming into play. So customers are saying, I thought I had this covered, right? So what I have talked about in that broadcast is the importance of a declination letter, which is a separate document that you provide to a customer, and it has two benefits. All right, two. One benefit is obvious. You are reminding, you're memorializing, you're formalizing the process by which you have said, I've told you you need this, and you have rejected it. That's important because, you don't want a client coming back later and accusing you of not being on the ball, not giving them a good solution. There's another really important purpose for it, though, and it's a business purpose. And the best way that I could describe it is if I said to you, I'm going to make a pizza for you, or I'm going to have some meal prepared. I could either deliver it to you for $5, $5 extra, or you could come pick it up. Now, I think you need delivery. It's $5, right? What are you saying? You're sitting there saying, well, you know what? I'm not so sure. I don't need delivery. I'll come pick it up. All right. I could just say, great, we'll see you soon. Or I could say, all right, Marvin, you want to pick it up? That's fine. I just need to tell you a few things. First, it is raining outside. Roads are slippery, especially around here, so be very careful. There are speed traps between your place and mine. Very expensive. You don't want to get caught. And by the way, parking lot sometimes gets flooded and it's hard to find a spot. So just circle around. Eventually, you'll find a spot. We'll do that. I'm not going to at some point, you're going to turn around and say, oh, my God, just deliver this thing. I don't want to get a speed trap in the rain in the park. All right. Same analogy applies here. When someone declines a service, you shouldn't just simply say, well, okay, well, you're going to be unprotected and walk away. No. You put it in writing that they've declined it, right? Again, to memorialize that fact. But you also want to say in that writing all of the parade of horribles that are going to happen. All the things that are going to come marching right up to your door because you didn't select this service. Right? This could happen, that could happen, this could happen. And if all of that happens, this could be the result, but you've decided not to move forward. More than half of the time, we have found MSP's customers will come back and say, well, wait a minute, wait. What are you talking about? You mean I'm not going to have this and this and that? Right. They will then rethink what they're doing. So it gives you a bite at the apple to memorialize things, but it also gives you a second bite at marketing. Very important.
What about when a customer comes back and says something like, oh, well, you're just trying to use a scare tactic. We haven't had an issue in 20 years. I've never gotten a virus or a malware or a ransom attack. That's not going to happen to us. You're too small.
Well, I mean, look, not everyone goes for it, right? I mean, not, I think the graphic for that broadcast is someone trying to pull a horse to water, right? You can take them to water. You can't make them drink. Not every client will drink from the bucket of knowledge. The best you can do is inform. information. And, at the end of the day, if they're saying you're trying to scare me, you can be very straightforward and say, I am, because you know what? If you don't get this service, scary things are going to happen. This is not, if bad things happen, it's not going to feel like Christmas morning. You're not going to wake up at 2 a.m. and feel all warm and fuzzy about the day. You're going to be angry. You're going to be worried. You're going to be nervous. You're going to have, these issues. These are real issues. So am I trying to scare you? Yeah, because we're dealing with scary things.
Yep. The analogy I used to use, I haven't used it lately, but I used to ask people, do you have life insurance? And they're like, well, yes. Do you think you're going to die anytime soon? Well, no. Then why do you have life insurance now?
Right.
Just in case.
Right.
And, you can't use car insurance because
you need it.
Well, it's the law.
Legally. Yeah. Right. The law. But the analogy is the same, right? Everybody I hate paying a premium. Look, I got 3 kids on my insurance that are, 22, 19, 17. I pay a lot in insurance. I hate it every month. Oh yeah. That's another podcast. Can I feed down my therapist into this podcast? Is that so? But the point is that, God forbid something, they were to get into an accident or something. Thank God I'm paying those premiums, right? Thank God. So it's important. And that's something that you have to emphasize. That is not and that's how people commoditize your services. They don't understand the value. They don't understand. And that might be because you haven't expressed it to them, or it might be they just don't understand.
Right.
And it's worth that extra step or two, both from a business and a legal perspective.
All right. Mm-hmm. So I want to go off course a little bit because you and I are dealing with a situation that, well, let me rephrase that. I'm dealing with a situation that you're helping me with. Mm-hmm. So listeners, Bradley doesn't just do your master service agreement and help you out with an initial scope of work. There are situational, things that come up, and I'm in a situation where one of my clients wants to bring in a third party for some additional services, and wants, let's just say domain admin rights to the network. Yeah. And I wanted protection so that if something happens that company does, I'm protected. So you put together for me, it's called a waiver of liability or third party waiver, right. which I like. Now the customer hasn't signed it yet, but it also is preventing that other company from coming in and doing anything on the network. And because it's a law firm, I think they're a little more nervous that they looked at it and said, oh, this looks pretty serious.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lawyers. Dealing with lawyers. The idea behind, the idea behind the concepts that we're talking about here is that sometimes you'll have exclusive control over an environment, and that makes it nice and easy. But increasingly, we are seeing joint management, right? Joint control. So it's either because the customer has an in-house IT department, right? Yeah. Or they have some sort of expert that they are bringing in sort of as a sharpshooter to handle a specific matter. And in order to do that, they need the access that you held, right? They need equal rights to what you have. And then the question is, what do you do about that? Now, a lot of service providers are very quick to give away that kind of access. So yeah, we work, we play with others in the sandbox. We'll be fine, right? The problem is that when you give the keys to the castle to someone else, you can't necessarily monitor what they're doing, right? Things can happen, and then the finger pointing begins. Well, I didn't do it. You did it. Well, you did it. No, I didn't do it. You did it, right? And since you all have equal access, it's hard to figure out what's going on. That's the first issue. Second issue, you have a scope of work, right? You priced out your statement of work. You priced out your job based on the fact that you would have exclusive control, and you wouldn't have to deal with the day-to-day, week-to-week issues of people messing around with the system. Well, here comes somebody else who's messing around with the system, and they might cause problems. Who's going to fix those problems? Answer, you. You're going to fix them. Well, I didn't price it to fix those problems. That's right. You didn't. So what are you going to do about it? Enter the type of documents that we're working with for you. These are managing expectations, understanding that when we give keys to the castle, everybody has equal rights, and things can happen that may or may not be able to be tracked. And just so you know, that's not on us. And then, of course, the second thing is that the scope can't increase because you've decided to bring someone else in, right? We do this. If we have to enter into the foray of what they are doing, that's an extra billable event. These are the things that need to be made clear.
Yeah, and that has really come in handy. And obviously, I'm going to now provide that for every situation where I have a junior on site, or even if I'm working with another company, being able to provide that separation to say, this is what I'm doing, this is what they're doing, and if you want me to supervise, which is one of the things that comes into play, that in a situation like mine, I'm the network administrator, so the client was thinking that, well, even if they mess it up, you're watching them, right? Well,
right.
No, you want me to watch them? That's more work.
Right. Scope creep in that situation is a significant problem. Yeah. It really is. It's a significant problem because things are going to happen, and then they're going to expect you to fix them. And you have a staff. You have to be fair to them. You have to be fair to your staff and their time. So scope creep is something you really need to consider in the joint managed environment. 100%.
All right. About me, that was sharing a bit too much, I think.
Well, but your situation is not unusual. It's something that we come across quite often. The question is, how do you handle it? You were smart enough, and I'm not being sarcastic, you were smart enough to call me or an attorney and say, listen, are there issues I should be aware of? Because I'm sort of aware of them, but I'm not sure, right? It's the MSP, it's the service provider that doesn't call, that just assumes, you know what, I'm going to save a few dollars and I'm just going to see how it goes because, we can work things out. Well, we're all friends until we're not friends. And
Right.
Then we're really not friends. So like insurance, like anything else, you want to spend a little bit now to make sure your investment in that relationship, your investment in that service remains stable, remains in place.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So again, I do want to thank you for being available and getting that to me, because like I said, they haven't signed it yet, but nothing's happened yet. So no harm, no foul so far.
Right.
But I think one of the things that it really did to this company is, over time, customers kind of lose that value. It becomes, I don't want to say friendship, but a lot of my customers I've had, 10, 15, I've got a few 20 years. And they just kind of assume that things are taken care of, things are going well, and they lose the sight of the value.
Right.
And
you're right. And when that happens, not only do you suffer from scope creep, but what you don't even see happening, but it is, but you won't realize it until it's really done, is you've commoditized yourself.
Right.
You've commoditized yourself. You've said, I'm going to provide you this service. Someone else wants to jump in. Yeah, let them jump in. It's fine. Oh, we have to do some other stuff for you. Yeah. It's easy to do. It's included. Every time you say that, you are creating that box. You're creating that box around your skill set. And I'm telling you, at some point, someone else is going to come and say, take a look at my box. Look what I got, right? Same thing they have, but I'm $5 per workstation cheaper.
Right.
Why should your customer choose you, right? You've created your own box. We have to stop doing that as an industry.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the fact that I think having that kind of legitimized even more the difference. Look, I'm looking out, not really just for me, but for you too. We don't know this other company. What if they come in and really screw things up? Part of it's looking out for you too, that we can separate, those types of things. And of course, having the tools, and this is not a legal thing, but having the tools to know when somebody logs in or when a change is made on the network. And luckily for this customer, I have almost all of that in place. I know when a device pops on the network. I know when a policy is changed in Active Directory. I know when a password is changed. Those types of things are critical.
Yeah. You know what else it gives you that we haven't really touched on? Credibility. Credibility. When you walk in and say, listen, I understand you want to bring this company in, they're going to do this and that. Here are not only the things that can happen, I need you to sign this form. You know what it means? What it means is, A, you have the foresight and the experience to know what could happen. B, you have the foresight and experience to know you have a legal staff behind you, right? You're not just some guy, you're not just Marvin from, the neighborhood that's going to help me out with my computers. You're a legitimate company that has the experience to understand the problems and the credibility to bring a law firm behind you, right? That adds value. Companies like to know that the people with whom they are dealing are credible, reliable, legitimate, not fly-by-night type companies. So you're not a fly-by-night company. You don't act like one. A lot of service providers do. That has to stop also, because that goes into the commoditization argument, right?
Yeah.
They don't feel legit. They don't feel solid. Their contracts look like they were written by a 12th grader. I'm sure I could, this service can't be that valuable. I'm going to go somewhere else.
Right.
That has to stop.
Well, that was a huge thing for me when they wanted to make a change. And I said, all right, well, I got to send it back to the attorney. I didn't see them. It wasn't face to face, but I can imagine the look on their face when it was like, really? You got to send it to your attorney?
Right.
So, that really cements it in the fact that, no, I just didn't download some form from the internet.
Right.
That, we can scribble some changes on and all is good.
Right.
I've got to clear this with legal first.
Yeah, that's the key. And the funny thing is that it's the attorneys that you're dealing with that should know better, right? They should know. They shouldn't be shocked that you're dealing with counsel. But attorneys are notorious for being difficult customers.
Yeah.
Attorneys and doctors, unfortunately.
And I have them both.
Yeah.
So, all right, sir. Well, we've covered at least all the things that I was thinking about. Anything new that has come up that you want to mention, or anything on the horizon?
Well, I think that the topics of the day are the same that they were a few months ago, which is security, right? Yeah. Security is everything. And, I personally, I'm looking to be certified, working towards CISSP certification. And along those lines, so security is always near and dear to my heart. I think that companies are well advised these days to, we can't emphasize this enough, to make sure that they have incident response plans in place, understanding that they are the targets. They are the targets of malware. They are the MSPs now. It's not just the clients. Service providers are direct vectors to their clients. They need to talk about security. They need to have the policies in place, not only for their clients, but for themselves as well. So I'm just going to send that thing out to the Podnuts world. I do a couple of podcasts on that at thetechnologybroadcast.com. But if anyone wants to discuss security, incident response plans, and so forth, love to talk to you.
Okay, let me ask a question.
Mm-hmm.
You said you're going to get your CISP certification.
Yes, CISP certification.
What real value is that for you? I mean, you're not an MSP.
Well, first of all, more knowledge is never a bad thing. That's one. Two, this is the type of thing that, as I mentioned earlier, helps me learn about situational realities. If you're going to be in this industry, if you're going to be a specialist, then you have to understand what your patients are going through, what the pain is, right? The best heart surgeon, I think, is probably not just the person who has the education, but might have had a heart problem of his own, right? And so you could view it from the patient as well as the practitioner. So from my perspective, I want to view security from a patient perspective. That's first. And from a practitioner perspective, more certifications are always good because it keeps your finger on the pulse of what's going on. And it adds value to what we bring to the table every day. So yeah, that's why I'm doing it.
Okay. All right. More credibility there. And I should also note that I had put in one of the descriptions, I had given you the adjective super lawyer.
Hmm.
I noticed that you have already received your super lawyer status in Florida for 2020.
I
And if
have.
my math is correct, that is now 8 years in a row or something like that.
Your math is just short 10 years.
Oh, 10
Well,
years.
8 years in a row, 10 years in total. Yes.
Okay.
So actually, your math might be correct.
Okay. All right. So
Thank you.
you're welcome there. And thank you very much for coming on. I know, again, I apologize to those that were waiting for the live show. We were a little bit late.
Marvin, that was my fault. You know, you can say it. It's all right.
I'm trying to
It was
be.
not Marvin's fault. That was my scheduling fault. I take the blame. I'm sorry. But I appreciate everyone hanging in there and listening.
All right. And again, if you want to get great tips all the time, go and sign up for the Technology Broadcast in your podcatcher, wherever podcasts are. And again, I will have links in the show notes on the Podnuts page. I will also be putting stuff on the YouTube page, so you'll be able to access stuff there. And as always, I recommend highly that you at least talk to Bradley if you have a managed service agreement that you need to give, have checked up, scopes of work that you need checked up, any other form like the one that I did with him. Be sure to do that at bradleygross.com. So, all right, Bradley, that's it. We're going to say good day. And
much appreciated. Looking forward to the next time we do this, Marvin.
All righty, sir. And be safe down here in South Florida and stay cool.
You too. Take care.
All righty, folks, that's going to do it. And until next time,